Okay, so this is day 2 on Mishlei 22, 24 through 25. A couple of pesukim here. Since you didn't miss yesterday, then feel free to just ask questions. Okay, so al tisra es bal af es ish chemos lo tavo pen te'elaf or chosav v'lakachta mokesh lanafshacha. So do not befriend an angry person. That's how we're translating bal af. And a man of fury, do not approach. Really, it would be man of furies because it's plural. Do not approach, lest you learn his ways. Pen te'elaf, like yafinan, his ways, and you take a snare for your soul. Okay, so we had a bunch of questions. Question 1, what is the difference between a bal af and an ish chemos? And that's another way of asking what defines each person in that way, and why the different lashon. What's the difference between ish and bal, and what's the difference between af and chema? Why is chemos plural? All the questions on the terminology. 2, what is the difference between al tisra and lo tavo? Right, and tisra we said is to befriend, but it also is like from v'hafta l're'acha kamocha. So re'a doesn't necessarily mean like a good buddy. It could just mean like a companion or a comrade. But what's implied by that? And then what does lo tavo mean? Like don't come, but like don't accompany him. Does it mean don't encounter him? Does it mean don't whatever? And then also, what's the havamina? I mean, is there a specific havamina that you are like attracted to befriend someone like this, or is it just a pitfall that you might want to befriend them for other reasons, and then this is warning you not to? 3, do both pieces of advice apply equally to both types of people, or is each one specific? Right. So this is like the ABB or ABCD question, right? Which is that is it saying for both of these people, don't befriend or come close to them? Or is it saying davka the bal af don't befriend and davka the ish chemos don't come close to? 4, what is this consequence of pen, right? Lest you learn his ways and take a snare for your soul. What is it saying? And how does it relate to the both clauses of chaf daled? In other words, if each one is specific, so then how is befriending the bal af going to lead you to learn from his ways? And then how differently is coming with the ish chemos going to lead you to learn from his ways? And then the way that David asked the question, I think, is what makes Shlomo say that befriending or approaching these angry people will be a snare? Couldn't it be a learning opportunity? Which is another way of asking the question of like, not another way of asking the question, but another way of asking that question is like, what will the chacham do in this case? All right. 5, what does mokesh nafshacha mean? Specifically, what is the mashal of mokesh, of a snare? And then what is the nefesh in this context? 6, what does or chosav mean? His ways. We saw that Sadigon translated it as like his theoretical positions and his ways of thinking, as opposed to like his behavior. Okay, so it's a very vague term. 6, what does we just said that. 7, what does it mean to learn his ways? How would a person learn their ways simply by befriending or approaching these people? 8, what are the 2 hava aminas? And we said that there's basically one type of havamina is I should befriend these people, or the other type of havamina is I could befriend them without learning their ways. So what would the, sorry. First one is not that I should befriend them. First havamina is I can befriend them without learning their ways. Second is that if I learn their ways, it's not necessarily going to be a snare, So what are the 2 havaminas? And then who is the audience for this pasuk? Is it just a generic audience for anyone who's susceptible to like becoming friends with these people, or is it a specific type of person who's vulnerable? Okay, so we had yesterday David's approach, which I took in just general terms here. So David said by hanging around angry people who tend to get their way, because angry people are pushy, and achieve certain types of success. Okay, right. Many times angry people will cause others to yield to them just in their forcefulness of their anger. So by hanging around these people, you will unconsciously take on those qualities in order to get those benefits, not realizing that you're picking up other liabilities of anger. For example, people who are angry ruin relationships. People who are angry avoid accountability because they blame external things instead of looking internally. There's lots of other like harms of the angry person. And Mishlei here is not really listing on the harms of the angry person. It's just, it's assuming that that being angry is a harmful midah, and it's just saying that you're going to pick up on all those things. Yeah.
Can I ask a question on that approach?
Yeah, sure.
Did you guys talk about scroll up for a second?
Yeah. I'm sorry.
All right, so you have the ish chama, which seems to be different than the ba'af.
Yeah.
Right. So how does a person who you're not even approaching
influence
like like it's not enough to not just befriend him. Like meaning the first one you can just not befriend and
right,
it's not going
and
to
you can still approach him, right?
Right. This one it's still going to affect you even if you're like just around him.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And not even in friendship with him, which doesn't seem to be
right. So we toyed with different definitions of the bal'af and the ish chemos. For example, one of them we said is that I don't even remember who said what possibility. One possibility is that bal'af is qualitative and ish chemos is quantitative. That because it uses singular and plural, so that bal'af means that he doesn't get angry very often, but when he does, he like blows up. And then ish chemos is someone who gets angry, who lashes out a lot in anger. I'm not answering your question. I'm just like setting it up. Another distinction we made was that bal'af implies a certain type of control over his anger. That he gets angry, but he can control it in some way, whereas the ish chemos is like dominated by it. Another approach was there someone who wanted to say internal and external, or external and internal? Is that well? Or am I remembering?
How are you differentiating between that and what you were just saying?
What I was just saying.
Because at least to me, what I would have understood external, internal. To be internal would be someone who has a lot of anger built within them, whether or not they're expressing it.
Yeah.
That's what you mean by internal.
Yeah.
And external would be someone who is expressing a lot of their anger.
Mm-hmm.
And then if that from there, then like how that plays out, how people interact with those different types of people.
I'll show you an approach. Maybe the reason why I'm thinking about this is because I just read a Malbim, and this I think will answer your question, Sean, but like slot it into David's idea. And it's not in your packet, but the Malbim. What?
The idea from yesterday.
I said your idea from yesterday.
Okay,
The Malbim's idea is, he says like this. Let me make this a little bit bigger. So he says, 24. Al tisra as bal'af. Yesh hevdel. Okay, classica. Yesh hevdel. There's a difference between bal'af u bal'chemos. Okay, I don't know why he switches to ish from ish chemos to bal'chemos. It's a very non-Malbim thing to do. Yeah. All right. Shebal'af nokim bagaloi. So bal'af takes vengeance openly. Ve'eno noter chema balev, and does not hold the a grudge of anger in his heart. Allah tziva al yischaber elav. To him, it says, don't become friends with him. Okay, ubal chemos, but ubal chemos who hashomer chema belibo ve'eno nokim techef. He's someone who holds the grudge in his heart and doesn't take revenge immediately. V'zeh gru yoser. This is much worse. Okay, how do you know from the Torah that this is much worse? From halacha that this is much worse.
Because it's usher to hold a grudge?
That's true, but the other guy's also holding a grudge. He's just taking it immediately.
Because I would say because oh no, never mind. That's the exact opposite of what I was going to say. Never mind.
Yeah, you know what we're saying, David?
I mean, if you're on Mitzvah, then you'd be over two things versus one thing.
Well, both of them are going to be over both, right? Because actually, no, I'm not even sure about that, right? Because the way that you're over in Nakima versus Natira is you didn't lend me your axe, so I'm not going to lend you mine, versus you didn't lend me your axe, but look at me, I'm going to lend you my axe, you know? It is another Hilchos Deos halacha, though. This is a good one to know about, especially on Erev Yom Kippurim. I don't know if you're gonna, if anyone's in danger of falling into this. Okay, we're gonna take a little side detour here because this is a good halacha to know. Lo tisna achicha bilvavecha. Okay, so how do you violate lo tisna achicha bilvavecha? Don't hit your fellow Jew in your heart. So it says kol hasonei echad Yisrael belibo avar belo taaseh. Anyone who hates a fellow Jew in his heart violates the lo taaseh. Shneimar lo tisna achicha bilvavecha. Don't hit your brother in your heart. Vein lokin alav zeh lefi shein bo ma'aseh. Okay, we don't give malchus because there's no ma'aseh. V'lo hisir Torah ella al sina shebalev. The Torah only prohibits hatred that is held in the heart. Okay, aval hamake es chavero, but if you punch your friend, v'macharif es chavero, or if you insult your friend, afal pi she'eno rashai, even though that's not mutter, eno over mishum lo tisna. You're not in violation of lo tisna. Okay, so in other words, I think people who don't know the halacha think that it's usher to hate a fellow Jew. It's not usher to hate a fellow Jew. It's not usher at all. It might be bad, but it's not usher. The isser is to hold in the hatred. Okay, and if you let it out either in an usher way, which would be hitting him or insulting him, or a mutter way, which is by like confronting him and saying, why did you do this to me? So then you're not over the law. Okay. And then he goes on, what are you supposed to do? When someone sins against another person, he shouldn't hold it. He shouldn't like muzzle himself and be silent. That says Avshalom did not speak with Amnon for bad nor for good, because Avshalom hated Amnon. Ella mitzvah alav lahodio v'lomer, rather it's a mitzvah upon him to inform him and to tell him and to say, Lama asita li kach v'kach, why did you do such and such to me? V'lama chatas li b'davar ploni, and why did you do this to me? Shnemar hochech tochiach as misecha. He segues right from here into rebuke. It's a mitzvah to rebuke your fellow Jew. V'im chazar ubiksh min limcholo, and if the guy goes back on it and asks for mechila, sarach limchol, then he needs to forgive him. V'lo yehei hamochel achzari, the pardoner should not be cruel. Shnemar, as it says, v'yispala Avram el Elohim. Avram davened to God. So that's how you know that from a halachic standpoint, holding in the hatred is much worse than letting it out. Because if you hold it in, you're in violation of this lo taaseh. And just from a practical shaila, hatred, how do you know if you've gotten to the point where you're over this lav?
You hope bad things on life.
I hope bad things on lots of people. No, I'm just, yeah, no. And the hint is that it actually the Ram did say it, but you just have to read between the lines.
That you are talking very not. You're not talking.
Sorry, yeah, I didn't hear that.
Talking straightforwardly to them.
Okay, yeah. So the shiur, this is the Rambam says this explicitly. If the person upset you so much that you just don't talk to them, okay, which is a very counterintuitive measure, right? This is like if you, in other words, like I think a lot of people go through the reasoning of like, oh, I just don't want to have anything to do with that person. Like I'm so angry, I just don't want to talk to them. That's when you're over, you know. So have we talked about this? I don't think we've talked about this topic before, right? Of bilvavecha. So let me just tell you the anecdote that I always tell about this. So there was this time when so I'd been dating this girl who lives in Far Rockaway for a while, and I finally met her parents, and I'm not going to go into what happened, but like the dad like insulted me like in a very he okay, well maybe I should say the example is he basically like questioned my gerus, like as if I wasn't sincere about converting because I didn't go by my Hebrew name. He was like, he kept on asking me my Hebrew name, and I kept on saying I don't go by my Hebrew name, I go by Matt, you know. And he like, I forgot the exact words that he said, but he was like, you know, if you were really committed to Judaism, you would go by a Hebrew name, you know. And I was just like, I don't get offended very easily, and I don't get upset like at stupidity very easily. But that was really, really like it hit me at my core, you know. So my dad has this, my mom and my dad have different pieces of advice for how to deal with stuff when you're angry. My mom's guideline is don't go to sleep angry. Okay, because you never know when it's the last time that you'll speak to someone. My dad's advice is sleep on it and see if you feel differently in the morning. And I find that I use different things in different ways. So so this happened on a Thursday, and so I slept on it, and I woke up the next morning and I was like even more upset. Like, how could this guy do this? And I realized I was going to be over this lav, you know. So I drove to his house and like knocked on the door on Erev Shabbos, and his wife answered the door and I said, I need to talk to your husband now, you know. And so she said, he's not home, but I can give you his number. So she gave me his number, and we met. We decided to meet at a Starbucks in Rockaway Turnpike, and we talked. And I said, "Lama asisa li kaf kaf, lama chatas li b'davar ploni," you know. And I said, like, no one has ever like, you know, like made me feel like bad that I'm not a Jew, you know. And so he was extremely apologetic and explained the circumstances under which he said this, because basically, I guess he had some relatives who had married Gerim, and then they like left Judaism, and like it was a bad thing. And so like he had, you know, he's like been burned before, and like he was worried about his daughter, etc. And like we made up and we hugged and everything like that. And that's like the healthy response, where like, you know, many times it is a result. It could even be a mistake. Like this guy did a hate, you know, but it was something where if you talk it out, then you realize the circumstances and you forgive them. And that's what this mitzvah is prompting you to do, to engage in dialogue with a person instead of taking the unhealthy thing of just like holding in the grudge. And it is one of these like, you know, so that's why I'm telling you, like the, you know, I wanted to never talk to this guy again, and that's when I realized, oh, I'm over this law if I don't go and try to talk to him, So it's like, it's just a very, and when I got home, I was like, this is halacha in action. Like, this is the system, what a perfectly designed mitzvah that prompted a reconciliation and shalom rather than like eternal hatred, Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so that's my story about lo tisna achicha. So that's why the Malbim says that if the person is openly vengeful, so then you should not befriend him. Okay. But if he's someone who bears a grudge, that's worse. And don't even be in his vicinity. Okay. And I think there's a practical reason probably why you shouldn't be in his vicinity. Yeah, and you won't see it coming because he's holding it in, right? So it's so I guess now that I read this out, I realize it's different than what David is saying, because David's idea was more about these people influencing you. This is about you being a victim of their anger. So I don't know. So let's see what he said. Oh, sorry. He says, Pentelaf or chosav, lest you learn his ways. Ki alidei shetargil b'drachav taaseh gam kain kain, which is the first time I've ever read the term kain twice. Through being accustomed with his ways, you will come to act like him. You'll stumble. Based on his explanation here, it almost sounds like this pasuk 25 is an afterthought, that you'll learn from his ways. Whereas I feel like the thrust of the pasuk is like that's the main reason, because it says pen, Yeah.
I was going to say on the similar lines of question to him.
Yeah.
If he's going to say this is how much more for me to direct how this person is going to hit you.
Yeah.
Then the word achicha would be a weird word to have.
Correct.
If you are going to say, as you were just saying,
yeah,
it's more of an afterthought, this is another thing that could happen.
Yeah.
And I could see that could one.
Yeah, correct. And I think that's why I'm a little, the whole pasuk is leading up to lest, that's the real reason you shouldn't do this, lest you learn from him. So it is, even though I agree with the content of what the Malbim is saying, I feel like I don't like the way he's reading the pesukim. Okay, anyone have another approach? Because if not, we'll do Rabbeinu Yonah, who has some excellent ideas, if I may say so.
I have a start of one.
Sure.
So, an angry person versus a person who's a man of furies.
Yeah.
Is, I was thinking, an angry person is like a person who's just generally angry, right? And that's their default.
Okay.
They're one of those people who's always in an angry mood.
Yeah.
Right. But they're not necessarily over the top or fire and brimstone about it. Right.
Yeah.
They're just an angry person to be around.
Yeah.
Right. Versus the man of furies is a person who lashes out and is impulsive in his anger. So it's not his default, but he's swinging wildly from side to side. He's a volatile person.
Yeah.
So I think with an angry person, it makes sense that you would say, oh, this is just his default. This is how he naturally is. And so if I just hang around him or I befriend him, so I know he's just normally a cranky person. That's not really gonna rub off and affect me.
Yeah.
Right? But when you hang around a person who's just generally angry at the world, that starts to wear down on you. Versus a man of fury, you would think also in a similar sense, that you can say, well, he's constantly volatile, so I'll watch out for that volatility. But with volatility, it's very hard to predict. So it's also not something that you can escape.
Okay, good. So I like that approach, because it is saying that I think the mistake is that you realize that someone who has subtle bad qualities, you need to guard against. These people have evidently bad qualities, and so I can just guard against them. And it's showing why in each case it's not going to be possible to do. The first one, because it wears down on you and you start to absorb that way of acting. I think that's why, for example, so I think that's what the Targum is getting at. We noticed yesterday, Mari Marie Rusa, don't befriend an exceedingly bitter person, which is that kind of person, or the way that Shani Fader, Allah Shalom, said, don't be a grump. So there's a certain type of person I like, the grump, who's just never happy with anything, always it's a variant of Mishlei's Nirgan, the complainer, but not necessarily I feel there's a slight nuance of the always angry person, low level hum of anger, versus the the person who's like constantly vocally complaining. And then the volatility, I agree. Yeah, you say like, I'm not going to learn from this person, so I'll just avoid it whenever they're angry, but you can't predict it. It could come out anywhere. So yeah.
And I think like Sean, I think you like hinted at it, but I think like a hobby here is also that like this guy is a person who has this quality, right? Like, or like that means that I, as somebody who doesn't have this quality, that's like more of like into hobby of like why you would think that it would have wrong.
Right. Okay. Right. Okay. So in other words, so the idea is, don't think to yourself that you can avoid being influenced by these people simply because you can identify what kind of person they are. Okay, the grump wears down and on you and influences you subtly, and the volatile person is difficult to predict. So despite your best efforts, you may still fall prey to their influence. Okay, that's just my note form. I'll try to expand it later. Yeah, Ellie?
Yeah, so I don't know about this, but if this word is like synonymous with anger, at least in the context here, but it seems like anger here is being portrayed as something or someone who's very cynical.
Interesting. Can you explain what you mean by cynical? Because I feel like people use that in a very
negative outlook on the world.
Yeah. So if I think with the bitter person, then that fits in. I don't necessarily see evidence for that level of specificity in the others in just the words of the pesukim, but I would say that the Targum seems to be saying that, or could be saying that. Yeah. Yeah. Because anger is more broad than that. Yeah. 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 David?
There's another thing with Sean's point, especially with al-titra, of befriending someone that just naturally, whoever you're friends with, they do rub off on you in ways that you don't even realize what's rub off on you. And definitely, like, I've even seen it for myself. And there are times where, like, there are people who have like certain like friendship relationships with, say, like we had like over the summer. Like, okay, like people that like
you're talking about the people, not the birds, right?
Yeah. Well, people I have like I'll have like bird related relationships.
No, I meant like friends with the birds because they don't think they have bad middos that rub off. I mean, yeah.
I don't start eating worms now either.
Okay, good.
So like certain things I just kind of figured, but like there are ways of like their personalities that wasn't going to do much to me. And yes, to a certain degree, like I was able to keep aware of that. But at the same time, certain just like ways of talking, once they are your friends, you kind of just, to be friends with your friends, you kind of just start talking like they do and act like they do. Yeah. Even if you do know certain ways that you don't want to be. Yeah. It naturally just happens. Yeah. I'm going to comment on that and then I'll comment on Yossi. So the again, I think probably the most important, hard to say the most important Rambam in Hilchos Deos, but definitely up there is the first halach in chapter 6. Derech bri'aso shel adam lios nimshach b'deosav uv'masav acharev v'chaverav. It is the way of human nature to be drawn after the character traits and the actions of his re'av v'chaverav, of his like peers and his friends. Okay, v'noheg b'minhag anshe medinaso, and to behave like the people in his community. Lefikach, therefore, tzarech adam hischaber letzadikim v'leishiv etal hachamim tamid k'dei sheyilmad ma'aseim yilmad ma'aseim. Oh. Yeah. Okay. That's the accurate thing. Okay. I don't know if it makes a difference. And therefore he needs to befriend tzadikim and sit by chachamim constantly in order to learn from their actions. And he needs to distance himself from the wicked who walk in darkness so that he does not learn from their actions. Hu Shlomo Omer, this is what Shlomo says. Someone quoted this in a Dvar Torah and they understandably mistranslated Yeroah as, so it's one who walks with Chachamim will become wise. The roek ceiling, and one who either befriends fools or shepherds fools. Yeroah means he will become broken, but it's a pun. The person translates he will become bad, but it's true, he'll become bad, but it's a pun and he'll become broken. The Omer, and it says, Ashrei ha'isha shelo halach ba'atzas r'shayim v'gomer. That's the opening pasuk of Tehillim, which says, happy is the person who does not follow the counsel of the wicked and does not stand on the path of sinners and does not sit in the session of scorners or mockers. So the mistake here is to think that I am in control of my my character traits, and to an extent you are. But if you immerse yourself in an environment where people have these bad ideas and values, or if you hang around people, you will be influenced by them, and that was the, I know it's like too late for most of you, I guess, I don't know. Whenever I would advise high schoolers on which yeshiva or seminary to pick, I would give them Rabbi Moskowitz's advice. His main advice was, he says, okay, shiurim are nice and like learning is nice, but he says the thing you should pay most attention to is pay attention to the type of person who goes to that yeshiva or seminary, because no matter what you do that year, you will exit the year being more like them than you were when you went in. So it's the people who you are around on a day-to-day basis that will determine your character. And that's why Rav Pesach at the beginning of this year and last year emphasized that like in the dorm, you really need to make sure that you are helping each of your friends up in terms of like maintaining a higher standard of like behavior and character. Because if not, if you tell yourself, oh, it's none of my business, like that's just his stuff, that will affect you. Like you're basically like leaving a liability there, which is a snare, Yeah. Yossi, what are you saying?
I just had a different approach.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead. Let me go back to the puzzle.
Okay, so
yeah,
my approach was, I feel like the sounding of an angry man versus a man of furies is very different.
Yeah.
So I feel like an angry person is someone that is verbally lashing out, and I feel like a man of furies is somebody that physically lashes out.
Oh, interesting. Okay, we didn't make that distinction yesterday. Okay, yeah, I hear that. That could also explain the master of furies, that it is referring to his wait, say your distinction again.
That man of furies is physical.
Oh yeah, and anger is
verbal.
Is verbal. Okay, right. Yeah, never mind then. I was going to say something else. Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. So then, can you explain why the pairing of don't befriend with the angry person, and then don't come close to the man of furies if it's action, then like you have to physically distance yourself from the person because they're going to harm you. Whereas I guess
stay away is because verbally he'll put you down.
Wait, sorry, I keep on getting them mixed up. Stay away. Man of furies is the physical, or man of furies is the verbal?
Physical.
Okay. Oh, okay, yeah, that's the physical, right? So that's saying stay away, right? But then with the verbal, it's saying don't befriend.
Don't befriend, because then it might not just be through his actions that you go down; it might be through his words that you go down.
Right, but why is that limited to a friend?
Because you take the words of a friend much.
Oh, okay, fine. All right, so it gets into your head more, and you take them. Okay, all right, that makes sense. Okay, good distinctions. And by the way, all of these are good interpretations of the what do you call it, the distinction. But what is leading me to believe is that since there are so many possible interpretations, it's leading me to believe that the essence of the idea does not lie in that distinction. That's just my own inclination. Like that there are so many ways to like differentiate that are all legitimate and all fit into the pasuk. So all these ideas are good. But I feel like the main idea is going to be like just the influence of the anger itself. Yeah, David?
Yeah, I just tried another thought.
Yeah.
What Yossi was saying, what I thought you were going to say. So far as then like someone who's like a mastery of the speech versus someone who just more like quickly hits, that I think also with befriending him, that someone who is able to do into speech, like the sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Like how the opposite is really what's true.
Mhm.
That someone who's a master of speech, I think, is going to be much more calculated and precise in how they're going to hurt you.
Mhm.
And that is something that I think also the more that you befriend them, the more they can really hit you hard.
Yeah,
And someone who can just all they can do is the physical hit.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter
that's
how
true.
much or anything like that.
that's a good point. That's a good
Much more
point.
better.
Yeah, good nuance there. Yeah, fine.
Yeah, this reminds me of a puzzle we did, I think, last year about like I think it was the lates, like don't befriend the lates.
I was thinking about the lates also.
We
Yeah.
talked about how like I remember using the muscle of like he's like a machine gun that you can like just spray around, like,
Yeah.
he gets everybody.
Yeah.
And like when there's nobody else to get, he just turns on you.
Yeah.
Like a chain chomp, I think I said that also. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this reminded me of that also, like this interpretation.
Yeah.
Because like that again, that leads into the hobby of like why you would try to befriend somebody like this, because you would say that, oh, like I see that he's like, he's quick with his words, he can like, he can protect you from other
Yeah.
people, let's say, but then you forget that like he's gonna come back at you. But also like something that I remember from high school was like it was always like those kind of kids that were like very popular, like ones who were like always like,
Yeah.
to put people down and like
Yeah.
always like really good with like snapping back and like
Yeah.
really good at arguing and stuff like that. So it's like, oh, like it is a kind of person who like, especially like in your younger years, is like somebody who's kind of held to a higher regard. So like it
Mhm.
makes sense that somebody who's younger at least would or like less developed would want to be
Right, because there's an attraction to bask in that aura, and then
Yeah.
get some of that. Okay, let's
I feel like we haven't been discussing the snare for your soul.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which it's we've been talking about that you're learning from him and that
Right.
it's influencing you. But then how's that?
Yeah.
snaring yourself.
So I'm actually, in the interest of time, let's do that through the Rabbeinu Yonah. Okay, Rabbeinu Yonah, and the reason why I really want to do the Rabbeinu Yonah is because his shot on the pasuk is good, but I think you can universalize from this to other middos. Okay, so Rabbeinu Yonah on the right column, 24. Okay, al tisra es bal af tisra b'shekel al tisu av lemat mosav. Okay, so it just means don't befriend. Okay, he's just explaining the words. Okay, the explanation is as follows: al yihi bal ka'as re'acha v'chavei. Don't let an angry person be your comrade or your friend. Okay, so I don't think he's taking it. Oh, whatever. We'll see how he takes it. So don't be friends with these people. You should be friends with someone who is a savlan. How do you translate savlan? Patient, right? A patient person. It says in the Musar text, okay, I don't think this is literal. When you want to become friends with someone, then you should anger him. Okay. If he admits the truth to you at the time of his anger, then you should be friends with him. I don't think it means that like you're on the verge of becoming friends with someone, so you should like go and like provoke them. But I think it does mean though that like, is this person's anger, which is very, very, that's the flip side of ego, right? Like anger stems from ego because it's a demand that the world be in line with your desires. Is that going to cloud his ability to perceive truth? If not, so then then you can be friends with him despite his anger, because everyone gets angry at a certain point, But if his anger is distorting his views, then he's saying stay away. This is like the litmus test. All right, v'im lav. It reminds me of okay, I'm gonna not record this one. Okay. So then he says v'im lav azovoso, and if not, meaning if they don't admit to the truth when they're angry at you, then you should abandon them as a friend. V'im yesh chemo, if es ish chemos lo tavo. Don't come to a person who is a man of furies. Hachema azamina af. So this is what we assumed also. Wrath is stronger than anger. Then he explains the lashon. Ki inyan hachema kishetigbar haruch belev mipnei hakas ad shetolid chom beguf. So chema is when you get so angry in your heart that it gives rise to heat in the body, right? So a person like gets red in the face or like hot-headed or like the cartoon like steaming from the ears, And then v'chein tira b'chol malkom shemaskir chema afrei ha'af. It'll say chema after af. The af uv'chema, the apo uv'chamaso, indicating that chema is worse. By the way, where's the lashon of af come from? Why does af mean nose and anger? Yeah, your nostrils flare, right? So that's even in like human signs of things like, like nostrils flaring is much less than like seeing the red, like hot, Vihine tira b'bnei adam mehem mishahu kasan ka'as kal. You'll find among people some who have a light anger, umishahu bal kas gadol v'kaved, and some people have a great and heavy anger. Who yikare ish chemos. That's the person called ish chemos. So right, so the people who get angry and then the people who get furious. Okay, and that's the ish chemos. Alkain amar es ish chemos lo tavo. That's why it says don't come to the person who is an ish chemos. Shelo telech b'derech ito. Don't even go on the path with him. Miloshen orach baraglav lo tavo. V'hakavana b'hishiru mizeh. The reason why it's warning you about this, lino raglo minasiv ish chemos, from following in the footsteps of someone who is a man of wrath. Lasos lo geder b'davar shelo yiskar v'lechabraso. Is you have to make a geder. You have to make a fence to not. A fence against becoming friends with him. In other words, it's not enough to say don't become friends with him. You have to make a fence to not become friends with him. And I think I've said this before also, which I will not record. Okay, then he says, Ki yagiu mimena nizakim gedolim. You're going to be harmed greatly by this person. But by a person who is just a regular angry person, or a person who gets angry, lo hisir al halicha b'derech ito. You don't need the fence. It's not warning against walking with him. Zulasi shelo yihi re'ehu. Just don't be his friend. Okay, so hold on to these thoughts for a second. Now he's going to answer Sean's question, which is what's the snare? Okay, he's going to give 3 answers. Pentelaf or chosav l'kach nemokish l'nafshecha, lest you learn from his ways and take a snare for your soul. Im ata ish savlan, how do you vocalize that? The tisra es kasan. So it's saying if you are a patient person, okay, not just a regular person, if you're a patient person and you befriend an angry person, so what's going to happen? He will provoke you many times. Okay, now that's a patient person. Okay, why? No one is as provocative as an angry person. Okay, so that's number 1. Okay, we have to figure these out a little bit more, but I'm just going to list them. So number 1, even if you are a patient person, this guy who's an angry person is going to get under your skin and is going to cause your trait of patience to deteriorate. Okay, he's going to try your patience. Okay, Vashenis, the second one, what was it? Oh, okay. Vashenis, and the second, I don't even know why I asked anymore. No, I'm just kidding. Vashenis, ki yidme lecha keheter hakasimo. This is an amazing insight. Is anger with him will seem permissible to you. It'll be like a heter, okay? Since you see him constantly getting angry, and then you will become angry at other people. Okay, so there's a well-known statement of Chazal that I think the Gemara says when you do an avera, then it becomes mutter to you, and then the Gemara says it becomes mutter to you, and says no, it will seem like it's mutter to you. So what's the basic idea behind that?
You make up excuses for why it's okay.
Yeah, right. You make it so there's a principle of cognitive dissonance where, like, if your behavior contradicts your values, then you'll try to like reconcile them, and usually what wins out is your behavior. So you'll come up with you'll warp your reasons to fit to justify your behavior instead of doing teshuva in your behavior to fit your values, So what happens though is that it's only though after that first time. Once you break through that initial resistance, it becomes much easier to do it. Similarly, when you're hanging around people who are involved in bad behaviors, whether it's anger or something else, it normalizes the activity, and then you become less sensitive to it, and then you justify it in them, and then you start to justify it in yourself. In fact, that's the shot we gave last year or 2 years ago on the first pasuk in Tehillim, which is the way. Okay, this is a side point, but it's an important side point here. So there is a question about what the order of these people is. So it says, Ashrei ish asher lo halach ba'atzas rishaim. So happy is the person who doesn't follow the counsel of the wicked. Uvader chataim lo amad, doesn't stand in the path of sinners, and uvamoshav leitim lo yashav, and doesn't sit in the session of scorners or scoffers. Now on the surface, who would you say is the worst one? Is the Rasha, right? But many Mefarshim say that since it goes from walking to standing to sitting, which is from like more like incidental to more permanent, they say that the worst is the lates. And Russia here does not mean like a normal Russia. It means like someone who's just like either inconsistent, or someone who's like involved in like a hedonist, someone who's involved in like the world of pleasure. So I remember we explained an idea in the Meiri that he says, I think he's actually quoting Chazal. He says, don't walk with them, because if you walk with Rishayim, then soon you will come to stand with Chataim. And if you stand with Chataim, then soon you'll come to sit with scoffers. And the question is, how does that work? The way it works is basically, you have these Rishayim, okay? And you tell yourself, I'm not one of them, so I can hang around them. But what happens with friendships, what's the basis of all friendship is identification, right? Like on some level. So what happens is you start to not identify with these people, but then you become friends with them. You start to identify with them and to see yourself in them and see them in you. And then just because you don't want to view yourself as doing bad things, you find excuses to justify what they're doing. And then that changes your values. And then now you find yourself in the company of Rishayim. But then you say, but I'm not one of those Chatayim. I'm not one of those sinners. But now that you're in the camp of Rishayim, you're closer to the camp of the sinners. So then the process repeats itself, that you become friends with them, you hang around them, you start to identify with them. And then slowly your values change because you want to justify their behaviors, and then you start doing it yourself, and then you justify your behaviors, and then you slip into the late same, and then that's the worst, So I think that's like what Rabbeinu Yonah is describing, that you see this guy always getting angry. So you, first of all, when he says yidme lecha keheter hakaas imo, I don't know exactly what it means by emo, that anger with him. I don't know if that means that you feel justified in getting angry at him because he's always getting angry at you, or when you are with him, you find excuses to like justify his anger, and then you justify being angry at other people. And then the third reason, ki lo tizgane alecha middos hakaas kasher batchila. The trait of anger will not be as despicable to you as it used to be, because you are accustomed to a person who's getting angry constantly, right? You lose, there's a word for this. you become desensitized to it, right? Because he's always angry, so you become desensitized. And again, that's not like, this happens with everybody, like same way that doctors become desensitized to like emergencies and trauma because they're just around it all the time, so there's a chance that you're going to become desensitized to this anger, and that is going to be answer to Sean's question. That's ulakach lemokish lenafshecha tikach lenafshecha mida shetia lecha. Oh no, it's not. He's saying it a different way. He's saying that you will take upon for yourself a midah that will be a snare to you, which is anger. I was saying that these are the snares. In other words, snare. What is a snare? It's something that traps you before you realize it, and then it holds you in. So I mean, it could be both here. Is that like, he is going to get under your skin because you're with him constantly. You will find reasons to justify getting angry at him, which will lead you to justify getting angry at other people. And you're going to become desensitized to the badness of anger because you're constantly being exposed to it in his form. And that's going to be the snare. And this is why I think that this is true for anger, but it's also true of lots of other middos. If you hang around a friend with a certain middah, well, let's take the example that Rav Pez was talking about, like with speech. That there's lots of averos that people do with speech, and whether it's lashon hara, nivul peh, like putting other people down. If you are around people like that a lot, you will become desensitized to it. You'll start engaging in it because you'll feel like the need to to clap back, right? And then before you know it, you'll have taken on that middah. So the takeaway. Okay, I mean, I think this is like, in line with a lot of stuff that we were saying, but he just fleshes out really nicely. The takeaway is the Rama Medeos, okay, which is be very, very aware of how much you are influenced by the people around you, and put yourself in good friendships and good social environments, because that's going to be the ultimate determinant of who you become. Yeah. Okay. Good Aseret Tshuva message, I guess. Yeah. All righty. My plan, well, let me end this now. So my plan is like this.